Have you recently lost an animal companion or pet? I have. And I wanted to talk about it from a really different perspective because I'm aware that many people go through huge grief during this process. Hello, my name's Patricia Warby, and I am a emotional healer. I work with people who've had past trauma, usually childhood trauma, and I help them resolve those experiences and come through to healing on the other side. But recently, I've been completely sidetracked by an event that's happened to me. I lost I don't even want to call him a pet, my animal companion, Sidney. I lost him just over a week and a half ago. I've recorded an initial video on week one, which was just an immersion in complete and utter grief. I recorded it on the first day after I'd sort of got through the initial poleaxing. So I think it was about 4 days after I'd let him go. And this is week two. It's a different week, it's a different experience, and I really want to chart that and show you what's going on. Now, normally, as I'm recording these videos, I do them weekly. Little Sid would have been right next to me here. He used to sit in the window right here while I did a lot of my work when I was online. He was just my constant companion. I'd had him for 14 and a half years. He was a year when I got him, so he was 15 and a half, and we had to let him go. And that's the hardest decision I've ever made in my entire life, because it's not something you have to do with humans. I discussed that in more detail last week, the sort of the terrible conundrum you're in when you are a responsible parent of an animal and you have to make that choice for them because they can't, in order to alleviate the suffering. Now, last week, the grief was really very profound. It felt very like having lost anybody that you love. But the difference is, compared to humans, I suppose, there's several differences. Firstly, he was with me all the time. I mean, even family members you don't see all the time. But he was just around every day, all day for 14 and a half years. And so the loss is not just the loss of the connection with that person, but it's their absence in your space. And, when I lost my mum, I missed her. I grieved her, but I didn't see her every day. So this is a very different experience. It's like a Sydney-shaped hole in my life right now. And it's really a very intense and complex process to go through. And if you're still in grief right now, I want to give you hope, because there is something that I think comes through when you allow yourself to process this. Now, the first thing I think is to allow the grief and very much allow yourself to take time out. Do not carry on as normal. Do not pretend. Talk about it to like-minded people, other sensitive or animal-oriented people. Allow yourself to cry, allow yourself to feel everything, but also allow yourself to be comforted, because there is hope, and there is a surprising gift from this experience. The second thing I think, which is really important here, is dealing with the guilt. In the scenario that I had to go through, it's not the same for everyone, of course. Some people lose an animal very suddenly, or they just die naturally. In my case, it was euthanasia and having to make that decision, and the horrible guilt afterwards. How did I know it was the right time? You start to get a lot of cognitive questions arising in your brain, the what ifs, what I call the what ifs. And they go over and over and over. Did I do it too soon? Did I do it too late? What if I'd done this? Should I have intervened at this point? Would that have extended his life? Those are the kinds of questions that go over and over, and they are absolutely draining, exhausting, and pointless. They are pointless. And how do I know this? Because everything I know about emotional healing tells me that guilt is one of the emotions that has certainly chronic guilt. I mean, we all have guilt. It's a natural emotion if we've done something that we regret later. But it should pass. It should teach us to do something differently. That's its purpose. If we just assail ourselves with guilt the whole time, and you find your thoughts are in a loop, you are being a perpetrator of your own suffering. And so we have to find a way to get through this. And how do we do that? Well, there are very many things that contribute to the sense of guilt. The first is if you've had other losses in your life for which you feel responsible, or you feel you could have or should have done something differently. Now, in my experience, I lost my father at 18. I was 18, which was, not something my friends and, people I knew around me were going through, certainly not at that age. And so it was very unsupported, an unsupported loss. People did their best to support me, but I was away from home at that point. And that loss, interestingly, has seemingly come back. It's the reminder of that. So there's the compounding factor. Then there's the loss of relationship. Obviously, loss of relationship with a parent when they die, there's just a gap where they were there. So that feels very similar. Loss of a relationship later on also was something that happened to me in my late 20s. And my relationship broke down and I lost my home. And interestingly, I lost the relationship with my two cats because I couldn't take them. They weren't mine, actually, they were our cats. I couldn't take them with me. They had to stay behind. So that was a huge grief as well. I think I grieved the relationship, but I also grieved those cats. I did. And because I never knew what happened to them afterwards, really. So that has actually come to me in a dream a few nights ago. And I realized I'm still haven't fully processed that one. I thought I had, but clearly I haven't. And so this compounding of losses is a really important factor. Now, it happens in trauma is that the traumas are often complex and they are cumulative. And so one loss will trigger the memory of other losses. And so you'll get all the same feelings that you had in previous times, all in one hit, if you haven't processed what's going on. And so that's kind of what I help people get through, is to process things so that they're no longer in their bodies ready to be re-triggered and causing all these symptoms of, depression, anxiety, sometimes chronic fatigue or pain. It's the main reason why people get chronic fatigue, actually, is unprocessed emotional traumas. So, there is something that can be done, and it is really a profound journey through loss, grief, guilt, which I'm living. I'm embodying it right now. And so I'm not just coming from a theoretical perspective. I'm really, one of the reasons I have this channel is not just to lecture people, but to reveal my own experiences and show you how some of this works. So it's something I'm really facing right now, is that there is some more work to be done. There's some more journaling, which I'm doing, deep contemplation. I've been doing a lot of gardening. I find gardening very restorative because it's very grounding. You're out in the daylight, you're touching the earth. It's also about hope and renewal, because you're planning something that's going to grow. You're either sowing seeds or you're planting, plants. So it's a faith in the future, isn't it? And this onward motion, which when somebody dies, does feel like your life has come to an end in some weird way. But the question I'm now asking myself, and this has come about very surprisingly, is what if we truly understood the nature of death as a passing over rather than as an end? Now, we do talk about people passing on as opposed to dying. We prefer the language. It seems softer somehow. And we, particularly with animals, talk about crossing the rainbow bridge, which is a lovely euphemism. I don't use it very often, but a lot of people who've commented on my posts, my social media posts, have mentioned it. I don't tend to go for that euphemism, but what I do see is that the spirit lives on, and it's something I've believed ever since my mother died, because I had a friend who was able to connect with her spirit and gave me some very real, very accurate information that she couldn't possibly have known, things that only my mum would have known about me. And so I was totally blown away by that, because I really didn't expect it. I have a very scientific brain, and that wasn't given to me in any science lesson, that we could communicate beyond death. So why wouldn't that happen with animals? They have souls too. So I was kind of exploring the idea, the concept that maybe Sidney's spirit is still out there somewhere. And in fact, we had 3 days of absolute hell, I'm not going to lie, of being just completely just in tears and just feeling so exhausted. And then something shifted on day 4 after his loss. I felt it, my partner felt it. It was as if the spirit had come back into the house that we live in, or he's with us somehow. I went to sleep, a daytime nap, because I was just so tired. We've had months of sleepless nights with his illness. And when I woke, I just felt his spirit in the room. And I said to my partner, I feel Sidney's here. And we both did. And that was so extraordinary. And it hasn't, that sense hasn't departed at all. He's still here. I feel it, definitely. I've had some very strange occurrences, apart from his meow on the first morning after he'd gone. Very distinctive, woke me up. You could say I dreamed it, but you don't often have a dream where you're actually woken. You could say I heard something, my brain interpreted it as a meow. You could say that. If you're a skeptic, of course, you would say that. I would have done probably, but my eyes shot open because it was his meow. And of course, there was nothing here. Day 4, I think, so 4 or 5 days after, I had another awareness. This time it was in the morning, very early in the morning, about 2:30. I looked at the time. I was woken by the sound of batting at the cat flap, we used to call it, where he'd get in a panic because for some reason, if he couldn't get in the cat flap immediately, he'd just bash it with his paw. He'd get very panicky. And so you'd hear that sometimes where maybe the magnet wasn't hanging in the right angle for the magnet on the cat flap. I got woken by that noise. And again, eyes shot open. That's the cat flap. That can't be. I waited to hear. There was nothing else. I lay there for a while thinking, I must have dreamt it, but this is really strange. I have no explanation for that. I did get up, obviously, and have a look, but there was nothing there. I couldn't see anything outside that would have caused that. It wasn't particularly windy. There wasn't any reason, again, so you could say I dreamt it. Okay, yeah, but that's 2 things. That morning when we got up, we have a camera outside which records activity because we have a lot of hedgehogs around here and my partner likes to feed them. And our camera records the timings of every interaction because it's a stop motion camera. So when something passes in front of it, it comes on. And weirdly, the time of the photographs switched spontaneously sometime after midnight from being the correct date to being a random date a month and a half earlier. I went from July to June, and at the time reset, everything reset, which is really weird. That, you could say, just a random event. These are all just random events, and you are trying to make some sense of them. But I had been watching that day, the day before, I should say, a series of videos because I've been assiduously watching stuff on pet transition and animal communication and so on. And one of the ones I watched was about how they communicate with electronics and that they can, particularly cats, have an affinity with electronic equipment and energies. And that's something I observed, as I've said, with Sidney, because I think he sat next to my laptop because it is a disruptive electronic energy, and cats can mitigate that to some great degree. He would often sit on the bed actually at a certain angle, which we found corresponded to the earth energies in the house, because I've had my house doused, and he would align with those. How do we know that animals can't sense them? I think they can. So it doesn't surprise me that something happened that night that disrupted the electronics in the camera and provided some weird kind of noise that woke me up that I can't explain. So things have been happening, okay, and you would think, oh, okay, well, these are strange, but can write them off. And then Saturday, we were both feeling a little sad again, and I was trying to comfort my partner, and she was saying, I just miss him so much. And I was saying, I do too. But you must remember he's in spirit now, and he's here with us, trying to be more positive and comforting than I really felt. But there we are. You do your best to be strong when the other person isn't. I can't imagine going through this on your own, by the way. I think you really need support. If you don't have somebody with you, please reach out to others if you are on your own going through this. It's hideous. So I had made that statement, he's in spirit now. I'm pretty sure about that. And I feel he's here with us, even if we can't see him. And yeah, we miss his physical body. We absolutely do. And his little routines, of course. And then I go upstairs, and for some reason, I think I had to check something online, which I couldn't do on my phone. So I got my laptop out, which I never do on a Saturday night. That's unheard of, because Saturday, Sunday are my, our days of rest, or should be. And so I logged on, and there was a message from an ex-client of mine, and I'm not going to name her in case she's watching. And there was a message, and it said, I really debated whether to send this to you, and this is going to sound really, really strange, and I hope I haven't offended you, but I've had a message from Sidney, because she is developing her tools and techniques as an animal communicator, and I didn't know that. It was news to me, because I haven't been in touch for a while since we worked together. And she's been getting messages from other animals as well, not just Sidney, But she said, he told me I had to send this to you. She said, and I know it's going to sound really weird, and I'm so sorry. I don't want to upset you, but this is the message. And the message that she sent was so apt. It just sort of said, I'm with you in spirit. I'm with you all the time. I know you're grieving me, but you don't need to. I actually feel lighter and better and happier than I felt in a long time, because I am freed from, well, the phrase was the ailing body. I'm freed from the ailing body, which was completely unsupportable. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because I had been saying online to everyone he was ailing for some time. And ailing isn't a very common word, actually. It's one that I use, but it's not one that many people use. So the ailing body, I thought, was interesting, and that his last gift to me, his last earthly gift to me, was going to be to teach me to communicate with him in spirit. This is bizarre. I read it, my eyes were like opened. I've never had a message like that in my life. I hadn't expected it, nor had she, the client, ex-client. So it was strange, and I was excited, actually. I was like, okay, so I've been given a message here that he obviously wants to reach out, and who am I to say this isn't real? I've really changed my mind on this over the years, since my mum has gone, and all the things I've been watching with the quantum field and so on, and understanding the science behind it, because I need to understand the science behind things before I'll fully accept stuff, because that's the way I work. And so there is a resonance, just because we don't perceive it. We only perceive a tiny, tiny proportion of the resonant energy of the universe. Our senses are very, very limited. Other animals have wider sense bands, as you know. Dogs can see ultraviolet. Cats, I am absolutely certain, see other beings. I can remember, actually, Sidney would sometimes, in his younger days, he would sit bolt upright, and he would be looking at something in the room that we couldn't see. like an energy or an entity, who knows? And we would be like, what? Don't do that. It's freaky. It's weird. Stop it. But he'd be like, no, there's something there. And that's something that many cat owners have noticed. So cats are peculiarly tuned into this. And so why wouldn't it be that maybe when they pass over into a new realm, if we believe there is one, of pure consciousness, if we lost that fear that is an ultimate end, that death is an ultimate end, and we saw that it is a transition, wouldn't life become more manageable and more joyful? Wouldn't we make the most of being here? Isn't that the journey? And so anyway, he wants to teach me how to communicate with him. And I was very nervous because I thought, well, I have no skills in that particular field. I've always relied on other people to get that kind of information. But apparently that's what he wants to do. And it's his soul I'm communicating with, not his cat self, apparently. And I kind of felt that. I felt when I was with him, there was a deeper layer to him than just this cat body. He had a deeper sense of knowing. He was very calming to be around. He was very grounded. He was just very soulful and gentle. And you just can't describe the feeling. So, folks, I have set up a conversation, which I'm having next week with this lady. She's been telling me a lot of what's been happening to her in the past few months with other animals that she's been communicating with, that dogs, and in particular, seem to bound up to her when she's out walking. Dogs that don't know her just want to be with her. They want to follow her. They want to go home with her. And the owners are like, this is really bizarre behavior. So she definitely has some deeper abilities. I've always known she was highly empathic. That was something I ascertained very early on in our work together, but she'd never been allowed to be. It wasn't acceptable in her family, and it'd been very crushed by events. So animal communication isn't something I ever thought I would get into. I'm not saying I'm going to become an animal communicator. I'll see how I go if I can find the skills. Apparently I have them. According to Sidney, I have them. I just don't know how to use them. And I guess it kind of chimes with me because when I'm working with people, I've often said, I'm being guided. And I don't just mean it in a sort of cozy, spiritual hug kind of way. I really feel I get information about this person. Sometimes it's a word, sometimes it's a feeling, sometimes it's ask them this, or go here. And I've become more and more aware when I'm working with people, I'm not working solo. There's something around me that's kind of giving me information that I'm using. And so why wouldn't that also be true of an animal that I've lived with for 14 and a half years who has suddenly departed? So his last earthly gift to me is learning to communicate with him for the remainder of my life, I'm guessing. How astonishing is that? Now, I have no idea what's coming. I do not know whether I'm going to be able to do it. I'm just recording this as a memoir, if you like, but also to give people out there who've lost an animal hope that death isn't the end. I don't think it is. I certainly feel he's here. And in that sense, because animals have no judgment and they don't want you to be unhappy, and in fact, if you're mired in guilt and grief, that blocks them being able to come through. So you really have to work on joy and gratitude for the time you had, and drop the guilt because it isn't helpful. It doesn't make sense from their point of view. When they went, whether it was a day too late or a day early or a week or a month, is irrelevant to them. They've enjoyed their time. Whenever it happened is whenever it happened. And they're just grateful to have been with you and to have experienced a bit of life that enabled their soul to expand. And so if you see it from the bigger picture, like a 360-degree view, instead of being down here mired in your own internal rumination, where you overthink and you overthink and you tread the same path over and over and over and making yourself feel absolutely miserable. You are not living according to the blueprint that we're designed to live, which is soulful, spiritual, open, and awake. And it's maybe why we have pets, animal companions, animals in our lives, is because they remind us of that daily. And I think what I've lost is that constant reminder to stay grounded, stay real. And he's here to show me that that can still be available to me, even though his physical body is gone. I will be recording another one on this, I think, because I think this is a journey I'm being guided to do. It's a little bit off-piste for me because I've always only worked with people and I've often worked with trauma. But here we are. I'm ready to be open to that. And I wanted you all to know that you have no need and no reason to feel bad about yourselves. And you have every reason to let go of the guilt, at least. I know the grief is natural. That's going to take a while. But the guilt is optional. And you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your animal companion to elevate yourself above that so that their truth and their light and their love can come through. So if I'm sounding very woo-woo today, I do apologize for those of you who are expecting a scientific treatise on the neurological correlations of afterlife communication. This isn't that video. Maybe I'll do one on that when I know a bit more. But here we are. This is a holistic vision of living and life, which I'm here to promote. That's what this channel does. If you like what you're hearing today, please like, please subscribe, and forgive yourself, whatever's going on in your life right now. We all do the best we can with what we have at the time, and we're all in a process of growth. So take care of yourselves. Look forward to speaking with you next week. Bye for now. Bye-bye.